Welcome to a special edition of the NWI.com Political Roundtable for Monday, June 9th. I'm Robert Blaskowitz, Assistant Managing Editor of The Times. Joining with me today, Krista Zivanovic, Assistant Managing Editor of The Times, and our special guest, Betty Cockrum, President and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Indiana and Kentucky. Welcome, Betty.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I mentioned that you're President and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Indiana and Kentucky. And so talk about the change that's been made in merging the two Planned Parenthoods.
The custom of merging for Planned Parenthoods across the country has been fairly prevalent in recent years. And in Indiana, in 19 years, we've done 7 mergers. To become just Planned Parenthood of Indiana, we accomplished that in 2004 when we did our last merger with North Central Indiana. And then on July 1st of last year, we merged with the affiliate in the state of Kentucky and became Planned Parenthood of Indiana and Kentucky, commonly known now as PAPINK.
And not Papinky, as you say.
Correct.
Well, can you talk? I think a lot of people have read about Planned Parenthood in the news most recently for the legal battle with the state over the state legislation that attempted to defund Planned Parenthood, remove Medicaid funding from Planned Parenthood. Can you talk about kind of the outcome of that case and kind of what's happened since then?
Sure. Indiana, back several years ago, was the first state in the country for its legislature to defund its Planned Parenthood, and in our case, that was dealt specifically with our Medicaid license with the state. And of course, it's important for us to be able to provide all of our array of reproductive health care services and preventive health care services to thousands of Medicaid eligible patients across the state with those needs. And so the minute that the legislation was signed, we sought relief from that, and it took about 6 weeks for us to get a preliminary injunction so that we could continue to be a Medicaid provider in the state of Indiana. And ultimately, last year we were given a ruling by the U.S. District Court that we would continue to serve as a Medicaid provider. And again, that's really important because to disenfranchise our patients takes a lot out of the public health care policy and a lot out of the public health care system, with those patients not having another home, contrary to arguments that were made by countless legislators and the governor at the time.
Why don't you give an example of where they said that those patients could go, places they could go for, we're talking basic health care services, not just abortions.
Oh, we're talking, most of what Planned Parenthood does is preventive in nature. It's our largest service is providing birth control. We do thousands of STD testings and treatments. We do breast and testicular exams. We do Pap tests to ensure that women aren't at risk for cervical cancer. There are all kinds of things. And yes, we also are an abortion provider here in Indiana, which was the whole premise for this legislative activity to occur in the first place. There were lists and lists of alleged other appropriate, acceptable places for our patients to go should we lose our Medicaid license. 2 of the most egregious of those, one was in Vanderburgh County down in southwest Indiana, where a legislator suggested that the Crisis Pregnancy Center was available to serve our patients. And my immediate response to that was, when's the last time you went to a Crisis Pregnancy Center and got a Pap test or your birth control?
Or
and
another tested for testicular cancer.
And another most egregious was the suggestion that our patients could go to a particular women's prison. And I just sort of think that's probably not true. And this was not a scare tactic that was helpful to anybody, and it's great that we prevailed.
Could you talk a little bit more, and you started to, and continue to elaborate on all the vast array of services you provide, including, I just learned, men are becoming a greater number of those you serve for preventive health care and other things.
Yeah, at this point we're really pleased that 9% of our patient traffic is from is from the male persuasion, and that's just a really great thing. Not only can we provide them the services and some education in terms of reproductive health care, but men are very much part of women's reproductive lives for the most part, and certainly they need to understand how all of that works and their place in it. And so that growing number of patients is a great thing. But again, what we do is largely preventive in nature. It is to help with STDs. It is to help with breast and testicular cancer, cervical cancer, and most importantly, it is to help Indiana women and men plan their pregnancies. And about 94% of what we do with our 75,000 patients across the state is preventive in nature, and the other 6% or so is abortion services. And we all we all share the objective that there be fewer abortions, and the single effective way to accomplish that is to have fewer unintended pregnancies. And as I said earlier, the facts remain pretty consistent. The numbers remain pretty consistent. Half of the pregnancies in the country are unintended, and half of those end in terminations. And so, to the extent that we can provide education, which needs to be abstinence plus, and ideally would involve parents as well, but we need that education, and we need access to birth control.
You begin to talk about those numbers and unwanted pregnancies and teen pregnancies. How does Indiana rank in terms of the rest of the country in terms of teen pregnancy and unwanted pregnancies?
Good news is that teen pregnancies generally across the country are on the decline. Here in Indiana, they aren't declining as quickly as they are in other states. We have 25 teenagers, 365 days a year getting pregnant, and 8 of those are under the age of 18. And
just in the state of Indiana.
That's just in the state of Indiana, and that's a concern that should be shared by everyone, because it is so much more likely at that point that household is going to become part of the cycle of poverty if it isn't already, and poverty is on the rise here in Indiana. And so, while it's really important that we pay attention to trying to decrease the number of abortions, arguably it is at least as important that we tend to who's already here and ensure that they can have thriving lives.
And much of your clientele is also poverty or poor populations.
Right. The key demographic for us is 18 to 24-year-old young women, and the vast majority of them are low income.
Can you talk a little bit about now your current campaign? Is it basically looking at teen pregnancies and preventing, or does it remain a bigger picture?
Teen pregnancies are at the core of that campaign, but I would characterize it as a bigger one, which really it seeks to address the whole issue of the cycle of poverty. And here in Indiana, in addition to the alarming number of teenagers who get pregnant every day, nearly half of the births in Indiana are covered by Medicaid, and the cost of the births alone is $500 million.
And you said, so our readers know, $500 million.
Yeah, that's with a B.
Yeah,
that's a great big bunch of money. And the most disturbing part of that scenario here in Indiana is that those births average more than $12,000 a birth, compared to non-Medicaid covered births, which are more at the $8,000 price range. And the difference is the difference in the cost is pretty obvious. It is unplanned. It is poorly spaced. It is lacking in prenatal care. It is oftentimes from an abusive household. There are all kinds of challenges with that pregnancy, and then there's a higher risk of a developmentally challenged child as a result, and that is a stressor on a household that probably is already pretty challenged. So
that has longer term consequences for more spending on Medicaid and social services.
So
it's
failed public health policy, it's failed fiscal policy. One thing I always try to stress is that when the Centers for Disease Control which is a neutral governmental entity, federal governmental entity, when they looked at the last century and identified the 10 most significant advancements in public health care, the legalization of birth control was one of those, and the reasons for it are obvious. So we wish for education and birth control to become cornerstones accepted and supported.
Yeah. Well, speaking of public policy, the Affordable Care Act has, of course, changed a lot of the delivery of health care. Can you talk a little bit about that and the impact for
That's
your clients?
something that Planned Parenthoods across the country have been looking at and trying to sort of obviously prepare for it. We celebrated, needless to say, from a mission perspective, the preventive care services that are being provided and products with no copay, and first and foremost among those is birth control. But it's uncertain at this point what the impact of that is on the business model and bottom line and the margin side for Planned Parenthood. So that's we're looking at that. We're tweaking, and we will tweak as we go as the Affordable Care Act becomes more of a reality in more people's daily lives.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have. Thank you, Betty Cockrum, for joining us for this special edition, and thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with another Political Roundtable.